Hello and welcome back to the Vintage Super League Season 5 play-in. I'm Rich
Hello.
Shea and I'm joined here with the reigning Vintage World Champion, Brian Kelly. Hello, Brian.
Hi, it's nice to be here, Rich.
Well, we apologize for the delay. We had a few technical issues, but we got everything sorted out, so I think we're good to go. So today we're going to be seeing Nick Coss, the Iron Chef himself, the man behind the Vintage Championship for the past few years.
Yeah, he's a great guy. I played against him once at the NYC in New York. I was on a Hate Bears deck, and he was on, I think, a Burning Oath deck. And he crushed me the one game, but the other two games, my Hate Bears really did their work. I had a True Believer in play twice, and it was pretty devastating. And then I think I had a No Rod. It was decisive.
So you got the match. Now, one thing that I'll always remember about Nick Coss is that he got me started playing EDH. He had this great Azami deck, and she taps to draw a card, and he had Mind Over Matter with her, so you could discard a card, untap her, and draw a card. So pretty soon, everyone at CMU was miserable, and eventually had to take the deck apart. But it sure was good while it lasted.
Yeah. Well, that sounds pretty exciting. I love Azami Lady of Scrolls, of course.
Yeah, she's great.
I've played her in a few random vintage decks. Let's cut Jace the Mind Sculptor and put in Azami Lady of Scrolls. It's not bad if you have a lot of Trinket Mages and Snapcaster Mages. It is what it is.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And sometimes you like to draw cards, and that's really good.
I love drawing cards. Like I would rather draw a lot of cards and lose the game than I would prefer to win the game but not draw cards. Like I just love drawing cards. And it works, drawing cards usually gets there.
I love drawing cards.
If I can just draw enough cards, I can solve anything.
Absolutely. That's something I really like about Laboratory Maniac. One of the unfortunate things about Magic is that you lose the game if you accidentally get too much card advantage. Monastery Mentor can help you win, but a card like Laboratory Maniac actually wins you the game if you draw too many cards. Right. It's a much better solution than, say, Obstinate Familiar, who prevents you from drawing cards.
But it also ends the game, and I don't like it when the game ends.
Even if you win?
I'd rather still just keep drawing cards and using Jace for 0 every turn. Because if I win the game, then we have to start a new game, and then I might not have like a draw engine in play. I could be Cabal Therapy and lose.
I guess that's a fair point. So today, Nick is going to be facing off against Paul Rietzl, who's someone I remember playing a long time ago at the old Your Move game store in Massachusetts, and I think he's a Hall of Famer at this point. And
I think so too. I don't know for a fact though. I'm not very well versed in the vocabulary of all the pros and the pro players. I apologize for that. I'm exclusively in Vintage, and I don't know what's going on in too many other formats. Although I know that they had an issue with Eldrazi in Modern, and that's basically the extent of what I know about other formats.
They did have an issue with Eldrazi in Modern. Fortunately, they got rid of them in Modern, and the Eldrazi planeswalked away from Modern and right into Legacy. And now they're a Legacy deck. So, it seems like you can't actually kill the Eldrazi. You can only get them to go somewhere else.
I've seen them in Vintage. I've seen people playing them in Vintage, and they're very annoying. I'm like, what the heck is this?
Well, I know Brian Schlossberg was playing 4 Thought-Knot Seers right into an incredibly uncomfortable 9th place during the Power 9 Challenge.
That card is pretty good.
Thought-Knot Seer is great. In a lot of ways, Thought-Knot Seer is basically a Lodestone Golem, in the sense that he's a 4-mana disruptive threat, and you don't usually see a disruptive threat at that sort of cost. Revoker's disruptive, but he's barely a threat.
Well, he is a threat, though. I think that card is very obnoxious, very overpowered. I think it's the most powerful card left in workshops right now.
You think so?
I hate it. Yeah.
Do you
I
think
don't think I
it's-
would have restricted Lodestone Golem. I think I would have restricted Thorn of Amethyst and Phyrexian Revoker. And actually, I probably wouldn't have restricted anything in that archetype. I would have restricted Gush and banned Monastery Mentor and banned Young Pyromancer. I mean, Young Pyromancer might not be at the power level where it needs to be banned, but the whole reason I want it banned is because it's so annoying and I never want to see it again. So if it's restricted, like, I still will see it once in a while.
That's true. That's true. I guess it can join Shahrazad on the banned list. Is that your solution to this?
Just things that I don't like, ban it.
Would you? Would you have? So, would you restrict Gush now?
Yes.
I also think that if the metagame doesn't shift from where it is, Gush seriously needs to be restricted.
It doesn't. I mean, that's my joking side. Like, I'm kind of just kidding when I say, like, if I don't like it, it needs to be gone. I'm only joking. But I also have a serious objective side. And coming from that part of my view on the format, yeah, a Gush should be restricted. And I do think Monastery Mentor could be restricted. I don't know why Tinker is even restricted at this point. Like, you might as well have 4 Tinkers because it's almost strictly inferior to Monastery Mentor.
It's funny because both a turn 1 Tinker and a turn 1 Mentor will both win you the game, but later in the game I'd rather have the Mentor because Tinker's just going to run into Deck Fade and your Jace, and Mentor's just going to run wild on them.
Exactly. And there's a cost in playing Tinker, which is that you have to play a 59 card deck, and the 60th card is something absolutely terrible that you'll probably rarely hardcast. I wouldn't say never hardcast, but every now and then you'll
like Mindslaver, exactly.
Well, I mean, like a Blightsteel Colossus or a Sphinx of the Steel.
I guess you could tinker into that if you wanted to, but trying to be serious here, of course. Now, I think we're about to see this match in action, so we can discuss restricting Gush later. But no, I think that if it doesn't change, the card does need to be restricted.
Yeah, it's a problem. It does too many things.
It does.
Like, I like a draw engine that hoses Wasteland. I hate Wasteland, so alright.
I know you hate Wasteland, but I think you should probably have to pay mana if you want to get card advantage. Alright, so let's take a look at we're just going to start the match now between Paul and Nick.
Alright, good luck to both Paul.
And, oh man, look at this.
Oh my god.
Paul Rietzl is on White Weenie featuring turn 1 Hate Bears, turn 2 Hate Bears, lots of hate. And Nick Coss is my hero tonight for playing -6, which is Chris Brown's rendition of Dragon. So, -6 is Chris Brown's version of Dragon, where he added Dark Confidants to make the deck have a powerful draw engine. So
do you think Paul would concede if the World Gorger combo were assembled, or would we have
I think
10 minutes of dead air?
So, for those of you following, oh man, you got the Bazaar. That's awesome. So, for those of you following along at home who haven't seen this complete contraption in action, what Nick's deck is trying to do is put World Gorger Dragon into the graveyard. And then, speaking of Ice Age enchantments, Nick can use either Dance of the Dead, or if you want to go even older, Animate Dead, or Necromancy, in case you want to have substance, to return the dragon. The dragon returns, and suddenly everything goes away because the dragon arrived. But now the thing sustaining the dragon goes away, and you get into this ridiculous infinite loop where all of your permanents are flickering into being and out of being, just like Heraclitus described the world. And all through the course of this, you're adding mana to your mana pool and decking yourself with Bazaar of Baghdad, until eventually you've gotten Una, Queen of the Fae in your graveyard, have infinite mana, and shift the animate spell onto Una, Queen of the Fae, turn your opponent's entire deck into a bunch of 1/1 fairy tokens, and pass the turn as your opponent dies.
Mm-hmm. That was very well explained. Very
I hope
comprehensive and very thorough.
thank you. I
You're
hope we'll get
welcome.
to enjoy this in action now because um,
Oh boy.
so Paul Reitzl's deck, uh, he has a bunch of hate bears which are trying to stop Nick Coss from doing things.
hmm
But Nick Coss has a hand that happens not to be affected by this, and I think he can do it this turn, can't he? Right? Oh, he needs the dragon. He can do it next turn. Okay, so Nick Coss has this. He can time walk Demonic Tutor for a dragon. Next turn, discard the dragon. Play. Oh, he discarded a land. He should not have discarded a land.
Yeah.
But okay, so it's not.
He's playing very defensively. Like he's thinking, what if there's an even mind sensor that he needs to force of will? What if some weird
That's
hate
true.
bear that ends up coming onto the table that he needs to echo in truth?
Well, okay, so he just needs to find a land in one of quite a few cards here. He's going to be able to look at Paul's hand and then go to the bazaar. Oh, okay. Efro in the chat is saying that it's pronounced Rietzl. Sorry, Paul.
Sorry, Paul, if I mispronounced it as well.
All right. It's apparently Rietzl. All right. Good.
I hope he knows the combo and just concedes.
So the chat is asking, where does -6 come from? It comes from flipping over a World Gorger Dragon to Dark Confidant, and thus you take 6. And there's the contraption assembled. I don't know if Paul Rietzl knows how this works, but now we are in this heritage.
I'll put Batterskull into play.
Batterskull arrives. Unfortunately, Batterskull will not stop the bad things that are about to happen to Paul from happening.
It's worth pointing out that the white hate bears deck that Paul is playing, which is sometimes referred to as white trash. I mean, I don't know if we can use that on this show, if that's a racist term or a classist term or something like that. But that is what the white hate bear deck is often fondly referred to. You know, white. It's just what it's called. And that deck has a lot of tools that can really make life difficult for this dragon deck.
Yes.
It just seems like he drew all of the wrong hate bears.
Yes, everything stops this combo from Containment Priest to Swords to Plowshares to Rest in Peace. I think Samurai the Pale Curtain might work.
I was thinking of that one, yeah.
But it just so happens that Paul Rietzl didn't have quite the right tools to stop this contraption from assembling.
Right.
So Brian, I know you're a man who enjoys his dragons. I know that you became Vintage World Champion with a lot of help from Dramoka.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of Ice Age enchantments, there's Dance of the Dead. So how do you feel about World Gorger Dragon?
He's a real dragon. He's a strong dragon. I think he's technically on the Council of Dragon Lords, because as you know, of the 5 Dragon Lords from Dragon of Tarkir, a few of them, their input is not valued when it comes to Vintage, namely Dragon Lord Atarka, and Salumgar's kind of fringe, but not enough that he's been like kicked off the council. So Steel Hellkite and World Gorger Dragon are more Vintage relevant than these other Dragon Lords, so they get more respect in this format. And I have nothing against World Gorger Dragon. Yeah, I don't think it's an inferior Vintage card. It's definitely important in this format. You don't see it as often on Magic Online just because of a distinction between the way World Gorger Dragon plays out in paper Vintage versus how it would be as we're seeing now. I really wish Paul would just concede. But maybe he wants...
I have to imagine that Paul would be sportsmanlike and concede if he knew what was happening.
Mm-hmm.
I have to assume that this is just lack of familiarity with Vintage.
Maybe that's it.
I think that's it. So as you see, each iteration of the loop results in Nick Coss getting 1 mana of blue, black, and red, or Nick Coss cracking a Grixis Lotus. And as this loop
Right.
recurs, Nick is also dumping cards into his graveyard. And eventually, at some point, he'll dump Una, Queen of the Fae,
Mm-hmm.
and then Paul Rietzl will dearly wish that he had a Laboratory Maniac in play. Now, you might think, why haven't I seen this deck? And I think you're seeing why you haven't seen this deck. Now, in Paper Magic, in fact, the better kill isn't actually Una, Queen of the Fae. The best thing you can do is play Tassigear. The way this kill works with Tassigear, and I think it was Vasu who came up with this,
He might have
is
Tassiger in there, actually. I mean,
I think you'll die of old age before you actually can Tassigear someone out. The way you use
no.
Tassigear,
Could you imagine if he was doing the Tassiger kill? I mean, do we know whether he has Una or Tassiger?
It has to be Una. So the Tassiger kill is you deck yourself, and then you, with your infinite mana, Tassiger back every card in your graveyard to your hand. And then you keep targeting your opponent with Ancestral Recall, and Tassigearing that back, and deck your opponent. So it takes... So Una only requires doing this loop like, I don't know, 20 times? So it's only like several hundred clicks. But Tassiger requires...
If you're going to play Dragon on this program, then you might just throw all caution to the wind and say, I might as well kill with Tassiger too.
Well,
we don't know whether...
I guess you could do that.
We don't know whether that really factors into...
I think Nick Coss would probably just burn through his keyboard before winning with Tassiger.
It would take a long time.
It would. So I have to suspect that Una will make her grand appearance at some point.
I don't know.
So it's an impressive graveyard that Nick Coss has acquired. He has 4 cards in his library. So if the last card in his deck is... Okay, there she is. There she is. Good. Because I guess he had an even number of cards in his library, so he would eventually find her before decking out.
Mm-hmm.
So now he's going to shift this card onto Una, Queen of the Fae. Una, Queen of the Fae has an X ability, which exiles your opponent's top X cards. And you get bonus fairy tokens for each card of a chosen color. This is from Shadowmoor block.
And we don't know if Nick is playing the transformational sideboard that we see a lot of times with -6. In the past, it would transform into a Jace Vault deck, like a Tinker deck with Time Bomb, Voltaic Key, and Dark Confident and Jace the Mind Sculptor. Recently, we've been seeing them transform into Monastery Mentor decks, although I don't think I see any Tundras in his main deck.
I don't see any. And so, no, it just looks like he has the usual Chris Brown Tinker plan. So he'll transform from a Dragon deck, which is a fun combo deck from around 2008, to a blue control deck from 2008. And Paul has... What's that card? Is that a... He's got a Mental Misstep and a Sword of Fire and Ice, and I think I drafted that card before. It makes the attacker sacrifice an attacking creature, right? Is that what that does?
I don't know. I'm actually
it's like a Wing Shards, but without Storm.
I can't read the text on the cards. I can only see the picture. Are you having a little difficulty reading the text?
Oh, I can't read them at all. No, but
okay. So it's not just me.
No. So it looks like Nick Coss has Time Vault and Tinker and Tezzeret ready to go, and Paul has. I actually can't tell. Okay. Apparently he's bringing in Grafdigger's Cage, which is exactly what Nick Coss's plan is.
Although it would
because
stop the tinker into the robot plan.
it would.
Graphics Cage
That's very true.
is still kind of a dead card because these blue decks, the Dark Confident Jace decks, they really just get so far ahead on card advantage that they take control
Right.
of the game.
Now, what I find really curious here is that Paul has boarded out his Swords to Plowshares. The way you can break the Dragon combo is with Swords to Plowshares. So the way that works,
And Rich, you can tell them what the bad result of having that happen.
yeah. So all right. So Dragon arrives. So Dragon comes back from your graveyard. He puts his Return Everything trigger on the stack. If you swords him, you can actually exile your opponent's entire board.
Mm-hmm.
And this is sort of like when you have Illusions of Grandeur and then someone red blasts it with the gain 20 on the stack and the lose 20 happens first, which is, I know, a timely and up-to-date reference. But the way this works is if you put Returning Everything on the stack and then you exile, or you put exiling on the stack and then you kill him, the return trigger happens before the remove trigger, so everything gets returned, but they're already returned, and then they get removed and the game's over. Speaking of game over, it looks like Nick has a turn 1 Tinker, but he doesn't have an artifact beyond Black Lotus. Ooh, so, I don't know, Brian. Do you keep that hand that Nick has? There's no way Paul can keep his initial hand. Are you greedy enough to go for the full-on? No, it looks like Nick wasn't greedy enough. And Nick mulliganed into a 5-card hand.
I might keep Nick's 6 and Imperial Steel for Lotus and just play Jace. But then I would also know, even though I didn't see the other Hate Bears, I would figure that Thalia and her friends are in there. So there's a chance that you can just get speared out of the game. I probably would have boarded out Duress.
Well, he's probably playing around Swords to Plowshares. And it looks like Paul is all in on Grafdigger's Cage, which is not unreasonable. The card does a lot of work here against both modes of Nick's deck.
It's much better against the Dragon version. Because if I'm playing a blue control deck and someone wastes one of their draws on something that stops one of my win conditions, I usually don't mind. I'll try to ignore it, because that's a way you get card advantage. Someone tries to hate on a strategy that your deck is capable of doing, and you don't even go in that direction at all. It's like, all right, you have a Grafdigger's Cage. I'm going to play Bob and Jace, and I'm going to find the Time Vault combo, and then I'm going to win despite the Grafdigger's Cage.
Oof. Thalia has arrived. So I'm kind of surprised Nick didn't use the Gataxian Probe, because he could have drawn a card with it, and David Bowie could arrive and prevent that from happening.
Oh, no. Oh, no. Now he won't be able to draw a card from the probe because that spirit is going to be in play.
No, the probe has been rendered useless now. It's, well, in case Nick didn't have enough swamps, he can have a bonus copy of Swamp.
Oh, no.
Oh, man. This is...
it happens. We all do things like
that's a rough thing for Nick Coss. He just played Glasses of Urza. They get shattered immediately. But you know, it was. Oh. So this is Paul's deck doing its job. It's not that it's doing ridiculously amazing things.
Those two are the primary bears.
Those are really good bears. Yeah, they're so good they're not even bears.
Yeah, they're something obscene.
I'm not sure what they are, but whatever they are, bears repeating. And speaking of top quality bears, Hammer Priest, and now this horse has arrived as well. I think,
it's a Pegasus.
Well, It's
Isn't
mostly
it?
a horse, right? Yeah, I guess so. It has flying.
Oh,
Um,
it's horse. That's like calling Dramoka a lizard.
and
Hmm.
there's good old Dark Confidant there too. I guess I guess Bob Markin watches you get killed by a bunch of bears. Um. Okay, so it looks like this game Nick mulled into oblivion,
Yeah,
and Nick is just
I don't know if
immediately, without thinking about it, just shoving right back in with Plan B. But I guess
I don't
Paul
think there
didn't
was.
actually
Yeah,
see what that was, did he?
no, it looked like it could have been the dragon deck from Paul's perspective. There was nothing. There were no tells that it was transformed.
Yeah. So, um, yeah. So that game you saw exactly what Paul's White Weenie deck is trying to do. It's trying to essentially just lock the opponent out of being able to do anything.
And these decks they're better than people give them credit for. I mean, there's somewhat of an elitism that the blue mages and even shop mages and like other legitimate tier 1 decks have in vintage that they're like, oh gosh, it's this hate bear deck. But it's actually very good, and it can be really hard to deal with it because we're used to
Mm-hmm.
dealing with sphere effects with artifact removal like Ancient Grudge, Urkel's Recall, Steel Sabotage. And a lot of times you just don't have enough creature removal on hand to deal with all of these
Mm,
obnoxious creatures, especially when they're wasting you and playing Stony Silence and
absolutely. Yeah, I think that the White Weenie deck is a deck that's worthy of respect. Um, so, man, I bet that Duress would have been a lot better if it were, say, Thoughtseize here.
mm-hmm.
Now, I guess Nick was probably not counting on the White
I
Weenie
hope
matchup.
duress him. Oof, I would have duressed him because a lot of times, sometimes I'll force of will their Mox Pearl or Mox something because a lot of times they have a cavern. So if you don't use your force of will, then you'll never use it. And a lot of times buying that one turn against these hate bear decks gives
Mm-hmm.
you enough breathing room to actually get something done. I'm guessing he's going
You're
to
right.
get this.
It's probably Lotus, right? So he can have Jace next
Yeah.
turn. But I agree with you that Duress would have been spectacular there. And
Mm-hmm.
now that the Lotus play won't even work.
Yeah, it's. I don't think this is gonna.
Oh, he
Oh, we
got
got
Ancestral.
ancestral.
Okay. Okay.
Interesting.
That's slightly less greedy. Um, so now I think it's anyone's game. Oh, wow. Containment Priest. That's a really strong one.
It looks like Paul is probably favored here because
I think so.
Nick
I'll
doesn't
certainly.
have too much fast mana, and Jace is going to find himself buried under the hate bears. He won't be able to use Jace to control the board. It'll basically
Nick's.
be an overcosted brainstorm or
Hmm.
unsummon.
Yeah,
Uh,
I'm not sure. I think Nick's.
ugh,
Oh, wow. That's really bad for Nick. Drawing Blight still there was terrible.
terrible.
And now he's going to tap out to play a top. No, Nick really needed a land there. I I also think that I don't know. I feel like it's very possible that the dragon configuration would have worked better.
Yeah, I don't like playing Tinker decks against Hate Bear. Because
Yeah,
of the Null Rod, because of the Wasteland. A lot of times, they used to sometimes have 4 chalices. Now they have 1 chalice. Like that can just show up, and it's like, oh, you were on the draw. You lose the game for 0. Um, I I'm not very comfortable playing Jace Vault against Hate Bears. I think it's
yeah,
a
they're
winnable matchup. It's
they're
just,
they're very much set up to defeat Jace Vault type decks.
mm-hmm. And that doesn't mean that they always do. It's just, ugh.
Well, Nick has to pop the top here.
Mm-hmm. He needs a land. Ugh. Well,
That's rough. He really needs to find Massacre.
Does he have it?
I hope so.
This is why they need to print a ley line of Dread of Night.
Leyline of Dread of Night. That sounds like a fair Magic card. Yeah, I'm sure that Standard will become a much more enjoyable format once Leyline of Dread of Night has arrived.
Get rid of all that.
I mean, Massacre is pretty close to that, right? It costs 4 mana, but you can also play it for free sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
No. Now Kataki has arrived, which will be lethal for Hall, and
oh, that's heartbreaking because I love that card so much.
You can time walk. You can time walk.
Draw confident and maybe buy a turn.
You can time walk, and what could he draw into? I'm not sure, but he can time walk. And Lumen Grid Warden sure would be good here. Well, he can draw a card off library.
And if he has a Dark Confident, he can play that because that's not... Oh, this is painful.
So, all right, he can brainstorm into land, Lotus, Dark Confidant, right? All right, he is out. He is out.
Well, land? No, it would take 4 cards. Ugh.
Land, Lotus, Dark Confidant. Oh, he didn't go for it. That's a shame. That's unfortunate. But, you know, it's hard not to root for Dragon.
Yeah, I like the Dragon. It's just always painful to see a blue deck get destroyed by Thalia. And you know it's all downhill from there. No, you beat Hate Bears when you're like Land Lotus Jace or like Land Lotus Tinker Force. But if the game starts to go on and if you miss a land drop at all, it's just a disaster. So those Hate Bear decks, they're actually better than they're given credit.
Oh, yeah. You have to respect the Hate Bear decks. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think Death and Taxes is one of the best decks in Legacy, and it's also one of the best decks in Modern, I think. I think it's severely underrated in Modern, but I think it's an extremely good deck. And it's not a surprise that when you can mox out your Hate Bears, it's going to get even better.
Yeah, it's good in Vintage. I've lost to Hate Bears many, many times, and there's still a feeling like, Jesus Christ, like I prepared for a metagame of all these blue decks, and here's this. And I find myself thinking the elitist thoughts like, but I know the reality of it is that these Hate Bear decks are very strong.
Oh, they are. They absolutely are. And, you know, that's definitely a big win for Paul there.
Yeah. Congratulations to him.
Absolutely. And I think that that's actually it's a perfectly fair deck because no one was expecting it.
Right. I can think of some people that will be happy to see Thalia represented in the Vintage Super League finally.
I think so. I think there have been people on the Mana Drain. There have been people on the Mana Drain clamoring to see Hate Bears in Vintage, and I think that those people have finally gotten what they wanted, and it arrives, and it killed the dragon, the full-on St. George.
I'm very happy for the Hate Bear players, the Fish players.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I played Fish for 6 months. It's a very strong deck. And it's very underestimated. People don't think about it. They don't prepare for it. And then they just show up and can lose to it from out of nowhere. And they get very angry because they're like, I worked so hard on my perfect Tinker and Yawgmoth's Will deck. And then, like, this stupid 2/2 creature just, like, ends everything.
Absolutely. So I think one of the things that was pushing the deck out of the format for a while was how good Mishra's Workshop was, because
I agree.
Mishra's Workshop's a lot better than basic planes. But if Workshop decks are getting diminished thanks to the recent restrictions, I think that there's going to be an increasing argument that the Hate Bear deck is the deck to fill in that gap.
I think.
All right, so it looks like it's time for a commercial. Again, Brian, I'm glad that we could get the technical stuff worked out so you could arrive for commentary.
It was a pleasure to be here.
Good luck in your match.
Thank you very much. And thank you to Athena for setting all this up.